responsibility for those beneath you not only existed, but actually to a certain extent continues to this day. There is a very large sense in Japan that people within your family, people within your business, your corporation that you work for, if people work for you, then there's a relationship of responsibility, the idea of kohai and senpai, or the older or more senior person and the more junior person. And there are responsibilities that flow in both directions.
I have this idea that Asian society is patriarchal. However, you present several examples of gender equality in your book, where women owned both the inn and the tea house. Hiro was searching for one of the female ninjas. What is the truth of gender equality in Japan then and now?
I think it varies on an individual scale. I think that you are correct in saying that Japan was a patriarchal society, and to a certain extent that it still is. Japan definitely had male shogun, male emperors. In fact, Japan has the only historical unbroken line of male-to-male imperial family that exists in the world. The current emperor is, in fact, the son of emperors all the way back to the first emperor, Jimmu. And so you have a situation where you have a society that on the surface is very patriarchal. But within that, women actually had a great deal more freedom than I think most people realize. And that's one of the things that I love pointing out in the books. Because actually several of the books have a onabu geisha, or a female warrior. So a woman of the samurai class who decided to become a full samurai warrior instead of a housewife. But even the women who became housewives were literate. They were taught to read. They were taught to write. Most of the time in a samurai household, it was the woman who did the ledgers and kept the books. Women actually ran essentially the family business because the men were out fighting. In many parts of the culture, women were allowed to own businesses. Women were allowed to join the artisans' guilds in their own right. There were women who were brewmasters, who ran sake breweries, women who ran tea houses, women who were actually moneylenders in their own right, not under the auspices of a man, but had their own businesses. Now, the female moneylenders typically only lent to women for the reason that male moneylenders didn't. Women who ran other businesses, though, would deal with male and female clientele. In fact, the book that I'm working on right now has a female apothecary in it.
What was your motivation or your idea of teaming Hiro with a Portuguese Jesuit priest? They make an odd coupling.
They are an odd couple, but they also work surprisingly well, which even surprised me, actually, to begin with. When I originally had the idea to write the series, the idea came to me literally in the thought, most ninjas commit murders, but Hiro Hattori solves them. And it literally just sprang into my head with his name and everything. I thought, wow, that's really cool. But I realized that I am a big history geek. Okay, I love history. I love to read history. I love Japanese history. I love culture. I love food. I love all these aspects of the society. And I realized that most of my readers probably would not be able to relate to it on the same level that I did. I thought, okay, I'm going to need a character that can act as a lens for Western readers who maybe know a little bit about Japan, maybe know kind of peripheral things about Japan, but who don't know all of this in-depth stuff, because it also gives me a really good opportunity for that character to ask questions. And then Hiro can answer them. And so I can actually share a little bit of information without falling into those big info dumps, or without having a character have to do something absurd, like have a ninja who's lived in Japan all his life say, these are chopsticks, which we eat with here. Of course, he would never explain that, because one great piece of advice that you hear a lot in terms of writing is remember that your point of view character really won't notice things that are normal to him. And so if you want to have something happen that your character notices, it actually has to be either abnormal to that character or abnormal to someone else that character's with, so that somebody has a reason to say something. And so this also, curiously, was not just the main point in time when ninja activity was at its height, but there was a very narrow period during the end of the 16th century when the Jesuits were also allowed to be in Japan. In 1603, when Tokugawa Ieyasu becomes the shogun of Japan, I think in 1605 or 1608, but he expelled all of the foreigners from Japan. He made it illegal for foreigners to be here. In fact, Shusatsu Endo wrote a great book called Silence. It became a movie as well recently about a Jesuit in Japan after that prohibition happened, which is somewhat later than my books are set. And so since I had this great historical overlap where ninjas were actually out running around doing their ninja things, and the Jesuits were here, and a Jesuit who'd been in Japan for a little bit would be exactly the kind of lens that my character needed to be able to notice some of these things he couldn't otherwise notice. It just seemed like a natural pairing, and it worked even better than I anticipated.
Are your books well received in Japan?
We're still looking for a Japanese publisher at this point to translate them, but the English versions are available here, and I have gotten some very, very nice compliments from people who live in Japan. So yes, they seem to be enjoyed, which makes me very, very happy.
We were inspired by the description of your book, Climb. We can't wait to read it. Can you explain to our listeners why this book is so important to you?
Absolutely. Climb is what I call a book of my heart. It's my first nonfiction book, but it is narrative nonfiction, so it reads like a novel. It is a book about my decision to break free from the fear that had ruled my life before, to follow my dream by attempting to climb 100 famous Japanese mountains in a single year. And a week after signing the contract with my publisher to write this life-changing book about really going out and pursuing dreams and living life, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So I contacted my publisher and I said, well, I'm going to need a little delay. And so I had a double mastectomy and I went through chemotherapy. And fortunately, they were able to get the cancer out. It's now almost to the day, 3 years later, and I'm still cancer-free, for which I'm very, very grateful. And I did, in fact, finish chemotherapy, fly to Japan 30 days later and start my climbs, and spent the year of 2018-2019, the year from the middle of one to the middle of the next, climbing 100 mountains. And then Climb is the book that came out of that experience.
So you've done 100 mountains.
I am up to about 140.
Oh, my goodness.
I had not climbed mountains before. In fact, I had gone up one on a ropeway and then had a disaster coming down. So it's a miracle that I actually didn't kill myself. I learned how to do it, and it's wonderful, and I really enjoy it.
Have you done Mount Fuji?
I have. In fact, it gets 2 chapters in Climb. I did climb it, and my mother, who was 75 years old at the time, came and climbed it with me.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was really wonderful.
Are you working on any new books at the moment?
I am. I'm actually working on 2 books right at the moment, one fiction and one nonfiction. I am just finishing up Fires of Edo, which will be the next book in the Hiro Hattori series. We've missed a year because of Climb, so I was out in the mountains and doing some research, but Fires of Edo is Hiro and Father Mateo's next step in the journey. You may remember at the end of Ghosts, they are heading up toward Edo, which was then not yet the capital of Japan, but would become the capital of Japan within the next 60 years or so. They finally make it. And as I mentioned, it is a book about the fires that were known as the blossoms of Edo because they occurred with such frequency. And so when they get to Edo and they are looking to warn the rest of the ninjas that they've come out to warn, they also find that there are some suspicious fires taking place, and they have to resolve that in order to complete their mission. And then the other book that I'm working on is a nonfiction book about hiking the Kumano-Kodo, which is an ancient travel road through the mountains of Wakayama Prefecture in southern Japan.
You have an amazing life.
Can you give our listeners your website so they can watch out for all your new books and your information on Climb?
Absolutely. Thank you. My website is susanspann.com. That's SUSAN, SP as in Peter, ANN.com. I tell people my last name is like a bridge, but with an extra N.
Well, Susan, we thank you so much for taking time to talk with us. We loved your book. I can't
Thank you so much.
wait to read the others. I'm a big fan. When I first saw it, I went, Japan. I've never read a mystery set in Japan.
Yes.
It was a very pleasant find.
Well, thank you very, very much. And thank you for having me on to talk with me. It's been an enjoyable talk.
Oh,
Yes.
It's been lovely speaking with you, and we wish you continued health and happiness, and be careful climbing.
Absolutely be careful, I promise. I would be most distressed if something happened to me, I promise.
Yeah, I'm certain.
Well, you have a whole day ahead of you. Ours is ending. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we thank you again.
Thank you so much, and you all have a nice evening.
This book surprised me. I was not sure I was going to like a book that was so different. I don't know why, but it was a whole nother culture, and I didn't know if I would like it or not. And I am very pleased that this was such a good read.
It definitely took us out of our comfort zone and into a different type of culture. And yet we had Father Mateo to help us ask questions of Hiro and figure out what Japanese culture was like. It sounds like it's not very different from the 1500s until now.
Well, you know, when I was reading the book, I forgot there for a while that it was the 1500s. It was not so out of the realm of what might have been 50 years ago, 100 years ago, that it just left my mind that it was the 1550s. I thoroughly enjoyed her character development. All the characters were really well done. I liked the cat. Of course, I liked the cat.
I liked the cat. I liked Saku, who was one of the villagers, and she was an elderly woman. And of course, the title of the book gives you an idea that there are ghosts in this village. And she keeps telling Father Mateo that he's a ghost.
Yes, yes.
I just found that so humorous.
I liked the hermit that lived in the woods and lived in a cave.
An odd character.
He was very well done, too. If you're looking for a little bit different, it's not going to be the same as the stories that we read that are based in the U.S., but it's very well done. The story just flows right along, and she does give you a glossary in the back, so the words for Japanese things that you wouldn't understand otherwise are all explained in the back of the book, which I appreciated.
Anybody can enjoy this book. There's not an overwhelming sense of Japanese culture in the book. There are definitely tidbits of that culture that are brought through, but it's certainly not in your face, and it's a mystery just like any other. If you treat it as such, anybody can enjoy it.
It was a pleasant read. I look forward to seeing what else Hiro gets into and Father Mateo.
But I'd also like that the Japanese people would point out to Father Mateo, kind of needling him because he did not believe in ghosts. Oh, there are not ghosts. And they would say, well, doesn't your religion have a ghost?
Yes.
And don't you believe in an afterlife?
Another book we recommend, check out Susan Spann's Ghost of the Bamboo Road. We thank Susan for joining us. We look forward to seeing what's coming next from her.
Absolutely.
My new and noteworthy book is Dead Perfect by Noelle Holton. It is the third in the D.C. Maggie Jameson series, put out by HarperCollins Books. It came out on October 13th. When the body of a young woman is found in a local park, D.C. Maggie Jameson knows she is dealing with no ordinary killer.
My new and noteworthy book is Little Bones by N.V. Peacock. It comes out on Kindle on October 31st. I have 3 names. I was born Lee Ann. I became Cherry. When I was a child, they called me Little Bones.
My new and noteworthy book is I Have Struck Mrs. Cochran with the Stake, Sleepwalking, Insanity, and the Trial of Abraham Prescott. It is by Leslie Lambert Rounds. It came out October 10th, and it is published by Kent State University Press. How the forgotten case of murder while sleepwalking changed history. After creeping out of bed on a frigid January night in 1832, teenage farmhand Abraham Prescott took up an axe and thrashed his sleeping employers to the brink of death. Trivia. Last week's question was, which Scandinavian noir author named his character after meeting a patient of his father's who was rumored to have killed his wife? A. Joe Nesbo, who wrote Harry Hole. B. Jussi Adler-Olsen, who created Karl Mork. C. Henning Mankell, who wrote Wallander series. Or D. Håkan Nesser, who wrote the Inspector Van Vetteren series. And the answer is B. Jussi Adler-Olsen. His father was a psychologist, and one of his patients, who was accused of killing his wife, was named Karl Mork. This week's question is, what famous author published her first story at age 19? Based on a story that was told to her during a seance? Was it A. Marjorie Allingham, B. Dorothy Parker, C. Agatha Christie, or D. Mary Roberts Reinhardt. Good luck. We'd love to hear from you at darkandstormybookclub@gmail.com. Remember, we're still looking for short story submissions for our newsletter. To put yours in there, too. You don't have to be a published author. Make this your first publication.
If you were looking to dabble
away.
Dabble with us.
Okay, well, that brings us to the end of another episode. We thank you for listening. Please join us next time. And remember,
life would be boring without a little mystery.
Bye.